Hello and welcome to this episode of How to Be a Great GM. In today's episode, I'm looking at the role-playing session that I will be hosting this evening, or will have hosted by the time this video comes out. It's a one-shot over Skype game where I have 3 players. I've never played with, well, 2 of them before, and they want to run a one-shot with me, and so I thought I'd take you through the process that I go through in order to prepare for this one-shot, as a lot of you have been asking questions along a similar kind of vein. Now, the one-shot, I have sent out some questions to the players already, and I asked them what type of game would they like to be in. An adventure game, an intrigue game, a horror, a thriller, some kind of puzzle-riddle type of game. And they came back saying that they would like some kind of adventure game with just a touch of intrigue, but mostly with a horror element to it. Now, it's a one-shot, so that means one thing. We're going to use the 1-to-1 method. And if you don't know what the 1-to-1 method is, go look on the channel, you'll find it. There's a video there on the 1-to-1. So the 1-to-1 is going to work best for this scenario. I've got maybe 3.5 to 4 hours to work with this team. I'm looking forward to it because so far the characters that they've sent through are fantastic. But now we need to create this one-shot game with a little bit of horror, a little bit of intrigue, and quite a lot of adventure. One of the things about one-shots is it allows you to do something that's quite focused, but it also allows you to do something that has a very solid structure to it and to test your skills with structure. Now, bearing in mind, I haven't run this game yet. From my timeline here, it's going to run, it's 3 o'clock now, it will run at 8 o'clock here, so I've got 5 hours before the game starts. I really don't need 5 hours to plan, unless I want to do something special. So, let's get the story going. Now, where do we start? Right, so we start with somebody wants something badly and is having difficulty getting it. Now, I always like to use the protagonist as having difficulty getting something. The antagonist, sorry. What is the antagonist trying to find? The villain of our story. Do we have a villain? No, we don't have a villain yet. So we want a bit of a horror element. Now, so I'm showing you it's a little bit of a jumbled process about where I find my point to start. And this will be different for everybody. You might not want to start with the antagonist. You might want to start with the character backgrounds that they've written, because they have written some backgrounds, that kind of thing. So I go to the setting, right? They want an adventure setting. Okay, with adventure, what do we expect? No, we expect chase sequences, magical places, daring escapes, some kind of journey through a foreign land or a special place. Okay, I like that element. We've got a little bit of intrigue. So with intrigue, we expect a couple of players to be involved in some kind of plot or some kind of riddle type of situation. And by riddle, I mean within a group of people. All right, so we need to have a group of people that go on a journey. Interesting. And then finally, horror. One of the tenets of horror is that it is in a fixed location. But now, surely if we're going on a journey through adventure, how do we have a fixed location? What if the thing that they're on, which is the fixed location, is on a journey? Okay, I think that starts to become interesting. Now, I haven't prepared anything before recording this video. I wanted you to see the whole process. So there might be a lot of me going, in this video, so brace yourselves. Something that's going on a journey that causes horror. What if we were to put the characters on a ship? Now, I'm not writing, I've got paper and pen here to write down the things. I'm not going to do that just yet. So what if we put the PCs on a ship? Now, if we look at the ways of starting an adventure, it could be with a combat. It could be, we don't want to do the awkward inn, but if the vehicle or vessel that they are on, sorry, and this is a fantasy setting, they want to play 5th edition fantasy. If the vehicle that they are on strays from its path, okay, why would it stray from its path? Because somebody steered it off course. Now remember, we need a little bit of intrigue, so why would somebody steer it off course to get it to go somewhere else? that somewhere else could be the fantastical space that gives us our adventure setting. So if we have something that's taken off of course that goes to our adventure setting, the horror would be that the characters can't disembark from whatever it is that they're on. That's part of the horror. And it's set in the world of Braxia behind me, so I've got to think about that as well. Okay, I'm going to draw on some inspiration where we've got a journey, people can't escape from it, they get to a place where it's horrific. Anybody else thinking kind of the Lovecraft Origins of Cthulhu story? Where we've got a bunch of people on a ship, and the ship crashes on a mysterious island that's just risen out of the sea to find all sorts of horrors and things, and only one of them survives and escapes. Okay, I quite like that. All right, so if they're on board a ship, the ship gets commandeered. It then gets steered off course to an island that is unknown to the player characters. Why would it be unknown? Could be lost, but we want that adventure aspect to it. Okay, I've just started rereading Terry Pratchett's Jingo, which is about a mysterious island that's been discovered. All right, I like that idea. What if the island was raised by whomever was commandeering the ship? Okay, so that still gives us a fixed location, but we get the adventure of exploring this raised island. Why would they be raising the island? That thing brings us back to the question of somebody wants something badly and is having difficulty getting it. What do they want badly? Perhaps they want something that's on this island badly, and so they're willing to steer a ship there. They're willing to raise the island to the surface of the sea. That speaks about a lot of power. So then what is it that they need from the island? If there is perhaps some kind of magical device that is on the island that is perhaps trapping this very powerful being on that island. And if the players manage to get that object off of the island, it releases the being from the island to go and ravage the rest of the world. That's rather interesting. So then let's kick back the intrigue a little bit. What if the person on the ship steers the ship towards the island because they know that there is something imprisoned there, and they purposefully let the PCs steal whatever it is that keeps the thing imprisoned in the hopes of getting power from it? That's a more traditional storyline, and it kind of sounds a little bit like the King Kong storyline. That new movie's just come out. I watched that a couple of weeks ago. It's a 6, 7 out of 10 movie. Nothing spectacular, but it's a very well-made movie, very solidly crafted. Okay, I quite like those ideas. I think all of those we're going to mix together. So we have this someone who wants to allow this being of power to be released from an island. Okay, so let's call him, what race will he be? If we go with High Elf, High Elves are arrogant. We want this individual to be friendly to the NPCs because he or she wants the NPCs to succeed. At the same time, this is a one-shot, so we don't have a lot of time to develop that kind of character. All right, so if this individual is a female who needs to be saved by the party at the beginning, that will ingratiate her into the party. Then if she gets abducted from the party, and I use quotation marks for abducted, if she gets abducted by whatever's on the island, then the party rescues her. She convinces them to get the stone. They get the stone. Everybody gets off the island. She releases the beast from the darkest depths of Hades. All right, I like that. So what then could be on the island itself? What creatures are going to be on the island? We could go with merfolk, but once the island is above the surface of the water, they'll just be flapping around all over the place like so many flounders. That won't work. Undead, of course, comes to mind because that would be the easiest way to do it. We want a little bit of horror. So what if it is undead sailors? Okay, that could work. And then, of course, the final monster creature for the second part of the second act could be a conglomeration of the sailor monster thing. All right, okay, good. So, back to our antagonist. I think we should make her female because that's a stereotype, he said, realizing it. We have 3 male players. All right. Let us make our protagonist female. It might make it a little bit easier, and we don't have a lot of time to play on sympathies. So let's make our protagonist a female. We want her to be a little mysterious, to have a little air of something strange about her. So let's make her from the Sajet realms. Now the Sajet realms in my world of Braxia, this large area behind me here, the Sajet elves there are basically desert elves, for lack of a better word, but I've structured them around the very Egyptian, ancient Egyptian cultures and things. So they use the dark eyeliner and that kind of thing. So we'll make her a Sajet female, and she needs to be a necromancer because she needs to control the undead to come and capture her and drag her away. All right, so she's a necromancer. I think that sounds a lot more interesting. Okay, so female Sajet necromancer, and she wants to release the evil spirit of something from the island. Blank space. But she is having difficulty because the stone, the trapped thing, although we said a stone or a gem, I don't think any of the players are playing thieves, so it might need to be something more different than that. Well, what if it was a sword buried in a stone, because we want to play on that little meme or trope, and that sword, when pulled from the stone, releases the being that's trapped underneath it. That's a reverse of the traditional means of Sword of Stone, which is, of course, you become king. So that works quite nicely because the sword that is buried in the heart of the spirit prevents evil from touching it. That makes sense. The sword has got some kind of protection from evil on it so that evil creatures can't pull it out, which means that it would have to be a good character that pulls the sword from the stone and releases this evil spirit of something. So, we now know what she wants. She wants to release the evil spirit of something, but she is having difficulty because the sword that is buried in the heart of the spirit prevents evil from touching it and pulling it free. Pulling it free. All right. So, she does what? This part I haven't spoken about in previous videos, and if you've watched this far, you get to hear this information now. Once we've worked out what she wants and why she can't get it, we then need to work out what her plan is. What is she going to do in order to get this sword pulled from the stone? Well, because of the way that we've been thinking about this, she is going to get a group of adventurers together, get them to the island, which she will raise using magics, and then get them onto the island, get them to pull the sword out of the stone, and release the demon. What could be easier than that? Well, nothing really. It kind of makes sense. But she needs to make sure that all of her efforts aren't a waste of time. If she gets adventurers to get to the island and the adventurers are all evil, none of them will be able to draw the sword. So she has to test their skills first. She has to test that they are in actual fact good characters, which means she needs to put some kind of innocent in harm's way and see whether the characters save the innocent or not for no reward whatsoever. That's an act of a good character, isn't it, if they see someone who's in trouble? Okay, so how does she set that one up? She needs to test their goodness. So, firstly, she books passage on a ship under a pseudonym. Spelling pseudonym. She books passage on a ship under a pseudonym. Why a pseudonym? Well, she's an evil character and she doesn't want to reveal who she is. Okay. Now, if you can see, I put a little star next to it because that requires some clues for the characters to possibly find. All right. Then she hires an assassin to... No, I don't like the idea of the assassin. It's too complicated. This is a one-shot, remember. So the first part is to introduce all of the elements. So she books passage on a ship. She needs to prove that the characters are good. So, she's a necromancer. She summons a fog which turns sailors into undead. Now I like that because what it means is she can summon up this bank of fog. And the players can make checks to see whether or not that fog is natural or unnatural. And as the ship starts sliding into it, the front of the ship, the players can start to see these sailors turning into undead as the fog touches them. Why won't the fog harm the players? Because our necromancer will cast some kind of protective magic over the players. Ha 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 ha. Now the reason why I like that, she summons a fog which turns sailors into undead, but casts protection over the characters to protect them from undead transforming fog. Okay. I like that. So what I usually do is I usually underline key moments that then need to happen within the story. All right, so that then gets our ship into a fog bank. It gets her to test whether the characters are good or not. And if the characters kill the undead, that's absolutely fine. The characters could now roam around the ship trying to figure out what to do because we'll make sure that 90% of the crew were turned into undead. Then they might find a ledger where there's a name entry for her. There'll only be 5, well, there's 3 players plus her. So there'll be 4 passengers. And in there, she will have signed her name as, she's Sajet. I would look around at pictures and things for inspiration, hence having a library of books and that sort of thing, so you can have a look at those. Let us call her pseudonym Manafari. But her name will actually be pulling on a little traitor from a very famous show that I like, Star Trek. Let's call her Seska. And if you want to put in the comments below where that name comes from, I'd be much obliged, and would be a kindred spirit because of that knowledge. Let us call her Seska. So, Menefari is the name written in the ledger, but her actual name is Seska. Now, the reason why that's important is because I'm thinking ahead into the second part of the second act, where we need to let the players know that Menefari may not be who she claims to be. And that means by revealing that her name is actually Seska. Now, I'll figure out how to do that a little bit later on. All right, so the ship then sails into the fog. They kill the undead, prove that they look good to her. She then says, well, can anyone sail a ship? We'll give them some survival checks. And then we will have the ship start to sail in the fog. Now, we need to start building up that she could be involved somehow. So we'll have her then what she does is she casts the spell to raise the island. Now, we still need to ensure that the players have the capacity to realize that she is not necessarily as good as she claims to be. So, loud chanting and ritual casting. So she has to cast the spell on the front of the ship. So arguably the players will go off for a short rest or a long rest, and then they will be woken by her loud chanting. This will allow them to go onto deck, find her casting the spell, and she will act all innocent, saying, well, she found this scroll in the captain's quarters. I'm assuming that they're going to go and search the captain's quarters. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. If they do, there'll be some trinkets and baubles. I'll throw some gold at them, and they won't find any scrolls of island summoning. So if they have done that, there's a clue that she is lying when she says she found it in the captain's quarters. I'll weasel my way around whatever accusations they throw at her, and if they try and stop her from casting it, I'll have her beg them to raise the island and tell them the absolute truth, that she is a poor, innocent Sajet who is here to try and release her father, who's been taken prisoner by insert name of evil spirit, and she has the scroll which will raise the island and allow her to claim her father. But she didn't want to warn the party because she was worried the party might think that she was steering the ship in that direction against them. One of the things I maintain, if you want to be a very good liar, is you should always tell the truth in your lie. So it is true that she didn't want them to think that she was steering the ship towards the island and this evil spirit. She wanted them to think that the island was discovered purely by accident and that the evil spirit was again purely by accident. So that part of her statement is true. Her father being buried there, well, maybe she believes the evil spirit could be the essence of her father, so there's a little bit of truth there as well. Nonetheless, the players will get their insight checks and all that kind of thing. Either way, I'm assuming that that spell will go off. If it doesn't go off, then I will have a cabin boy who was not turned into undead find the scroll from the players and read it out aloud because they're curious. Or the players will read it out aloud. Either way. Actually, if I give the players a map of the island which is part of the scroll, and on it I put a giant X to perhaps indicate treasure, that might just get them to do it themselves, which I kind of like, because self-inflicted scenarios are always better because it makes it feel like the players came up with the idea more than the GM. All right, so she has a map of the island which talks of buried treasure and knowledge. Again, not entirely untrue, and if this was an evil necromancer who made the map, then that would work. But at the same time, it was a good force that buried the spirit there. So maybe the good force made a map for posterity to make sure people knew how to find this demon if they'd ever tried to escape. So let's magic it written in Celestial. I like that. All right, good. So what I do now is I just do an arrow saying I need to draw a map. Okay, so suffice it to say, one way or another, the ship will now crash, beach itself onto the island. So it beaches itself on the island, and then we have the trek across the island, the walk, the hike, walk across island. And now, here is where we need to introduce the fact that Seska, or that Nefari, is not whom she claims to be. This could be quite amusing if we have if we have an undead raven who recognizes Seska and calls her out on her actions. So as they're walking along, this carrion bird looks up and says, "Oh, Seska, you've returned again, have you? Think you're going to be successful this time? I doubt it." Ha ha ha. Well, something like that. Then if they ask the raven questions, Seska will kill the raven. If they protect, so Seska will kill. If they protect the raven will tell the players that there is an ancient spirit. Oh, let's give it a name. Let's give it a name. What is this ancient spirit that needs to be buried under the sea? What would you bury under the sea? Something that maybe thrives in the air. And the raven might be a clue that it could be some kind of aerial spirit. Well, that could be quite poetic. If the sword was thrown through the creature whilst it was in the air and pegged it to the ground, and then they sunk the entire island under the water to make sure that it could never escape. That's quite an interesting little story. Very simple one, but there we go. Notice how everything that I am thinking of comes into some kind of narrative story where I work out how it got there or why it's there and what it's going to do to my main story. This allows me to, at any point, if the players deviate off course, to be able to pick up on any of these creation stories and come back and say, right, so this is here because of that, so then they've avoided the raven because they went this way. I put the raven wherever they go anyway, but for argument's sake, they don't go to the island. I need to bring this back somehow. I can use the little micro stories that I've scattered throughout this main story as potential hooks to get the players back on course. So the evil spirit is the spirit of air, which means it comes from the plane of air. But perhaps it was demented. So, if it was demented, let's use that little trick of how to come up with names. If you haven't watched that, it might be under the old Bacon RPG channel called Coming Up with Names for Your Characters, I think. Don't judge me. There's so many episodes, I can't keep track of all of them. I'm not that smart. So we have a demented air elemental. My first instinct was to call it demental, but that won't work. Demare. So the letters I'm busy pulling out, I'm busy rearranging, I hope you can see that, rearranging Demented Air Elemental, Demented. I'm just looking at options. I like the Dement part. What if we went Dementos? How does the name Dementos Ertid sound to you? I can live with that. Dementos Ertid. All right, so Dementos Ertid. Dementos Ertid. Okay, good. So, right. Seska will kill the Raven, so we're back on the Raven story. Raven will tell helpful players the Raven will tell helpful players that the air spirit known as Dementos Ertid is or was trapped here. This is why it's important to work out the story. Millennia ago, by a holy paladin of player X. So one of the players will have a religion. We'll choose that religion and we'll make this the paladin who'd entrapped Dementos Ertid will be from that religion, just to hook them in a little bit more. Buried with fortune of the air kingdom of we need an air sounding name. It doesn't exist in my world because my world traditionally doesn't have dimensional travel to different planes or planar travel. So the air kingdom of Etherios, very stereotypical. So this is a double barrel name, Dementos Ertid. Perhaps it can be the kingdom of Aethervos. Why not? The kingdom of Aethervos. So the Raven is not going to stop the party from continuing. He's not going to say that, it will allow Dementos Ertid to escape from this miserable prison. No, he will say, it was defeated by the paladin of Tandas and buried with the fortune of the air kingdom of Aethervos. That's why Seska's after it. She wants the gold. The Raven doesn't know why Seska's here. The Raven just knows that Seska's been here before, repeatedly, and has never got what she was seeking. If the players haven't yet killed Seska, if they turn on her, she will raise undead and she will flee. If they continue to believe her, as she will protest her innocence, and that it's an undead raven, you're not going to trust an undead raven over living flesh, are you? That wouldn't make sense. The players can continue, then they're going to get to the tomb. This is only a one-shot, so they need to get to the tomb or the burial site. Now, we can't make it too easy for the players, so we will throw in an encounter with undead sailors. But we don't necessarily want the sailors to be the same as the sailors that they would have fought on the ship. That's just giving the players more of the same, and if they dispatch the pirates on the ship, or the sailors on the ship who turn to undead, that would be too easy. So, we know Seska's brought pirates and sailors here before. And the air elemental might be leaking power. So, we want it to be, remember it's an adventure as well, so that means fantastical things. I'm thinking about air, some kind of air combat, that sort of thing. I'm thinking about having some kind of amazing moment. What if the encounter with the undead sailors happens over a gorge? So in other words, the players get to this precipice that drops 1,000 foot down into the base of this island. In order to get across, Seska can use her powers to raise undead, so Seska raises undead What's interesting from the ocean? Dolphins, sounds too much like those. She's raising Care Bears. She raises an undead whale, which she and the players ride across the gorge. Now, if the players have gotten rid of Seska or somehow managed to defeat her, then they won't have that option. Then we'll insert one by Old Rickety Bridge, or Old Bridge. Because then the encounter with the sailors is undead sailors riding undead sharks. Actually, we don't even need the sailors, you know that. Undead flying sharks. I think that is quite fun. Because that could be absolutely terrifying, as a matter of fact. Right, good. Then they get to Stone, after they've defeated the undead sharks. Now, this is the point where, of course, I can cut this battle out completely. It won't make a difference to the story if I'm running out of time. They get to the stone with the sword. If Seska's still there, they might battle Seska. If she hasn't been proven to be a traitor and she's still working with them, she'll stand back, let them draw the stone. They're going to want to investigate this stone because they've now got a lot of conflicting reports. It could be this errant elemental Dementos Airteed. It could be a treasure. They're not entirely sure. So the sword would be the sword of some powerful paladin. So the sword of the paladin, known as, let's go with the traditional one since we're going with sword and the stone, Uthar Pendaris. Where's the little raven? Ancient spear trapped here millennia ago by the holy paladin Uthar Pendaris. All right, I know this is a long video. Bear with me. We're getting there, guys. I really am taking a long time there because I'm explaining things, obviously, as I go along. So I hope you're still watching because we're getting to the part now where we take all of this. All right, so the sword of the paladin known as Uthar Pendaris is buried in a stone. Which is in the shape of a humanoid figure spread eagled on the ground. Okay. At this point, if the players pull the sword, the spirit is released, Seska is granted power, and she leaves. Well, because this is not about the major fight with this spirit, because you have to be a paladin, blah, blah, blah. As soon as sword is pulled, island begins to sink. Right. Time trial here for the players to get back to the ship. Assumedly, they're not going to go down with the island. Seska, her entire goal was to release the spirit. So she's not going to get back to the ship. Does she need to prevent the players from getting back to the ship? No, I don't think the players need to do that. I think if we've had an encounter with Seska, we don't need another one. So the players get back to the ship, the island sinks, Seska appears in the arms of this air elemental, thanks the players for their contribution to releasing this evil, and then sails off. But that's very, very unsatisfactory for the players. If they haven't worked out that Seska is an evil character and they help her with her plan, it will feel as if they've been cheated. On the other hand, I can't have another battle because I've already had 2, and to try and fit in 3 in a one-shot is a little bit tricky, especially because this would need to be some kind of epic Titanic battle. So the sword has an inscription that reads, self-sacrifice will entomb both good and evil forever. Big block around that. So in other words, if one of the players stabs themselves with the sword, they will trap the evil inside the sword with the character. That makes for a grand death, and of course allows the rest of our heroes to escape. Okay, so now we have 2 foolscap pages of my crazy writing where I've drawn blocks and things around everything, making my notes. What I now want to do is very quickly, I then turn this into steps. So I'll write 1, which is introduction. We all know that part. That is Seska on ship, fog, island. No, fog. All right. Before we get into part 2, we have a combat, which is undead sailors. All right. Part 2 is Act 2, Part 1. So Part 1 is Island, Journey, and Raven. The Raven that gives them the additional information. Part 2 is Undead Shark Attack. Make sense? And Sword. And part 3, the conclusion, is Seska and Etid confront players. And island sinks. All right. So very simply, part 1, part 2, part 3, and what then needs to happen. So now that I have this written out, I don't really have to go over my notes again. I'll keep my notes with me because, of course, I've got important names that I've highlighted and that I've worked around and that I need to include in information as per the story goes. Now, in terms of the undead sailors, I've allowed the characters to be level 3. So They've got basically +3 or 4 to their attacks. They've got about 24 to 35 hit points. So my sailors are going to have +2 to their attack, generally speaking. 12 hit points, maybe a little bit less, and that's about it. Maybe the captain of the ship will give something a little bit more if the combat's gone really easy for the players. The sharks will give them +5 to hit, will make them really dangerous. They'll take big chunks out of their target. Maybe we'll only have 2 or 3 sharks, not too many. And again, depending on timing. So that's another important thing. So if we go back to timing, and I look here, if you're still with me, I really appreciate it. So if we look at the timing here, traditionally if we go with the 4 hours, we'd go 1 hour for intro, 1 hour for part 1, part 2, and 1 hour for conclusion. The conclusion I don't think needs to take an hour because it doesn't involve a combat. So I'm going to say the conclusion should be 30 minutes. That gives me quite a long time. So my introduction, the ship, the fog, the combat, I don't want that to take too long. So I'm also going to make that 30 minutes. This is a one shot. I need to entertain these guys from the get-go. And so if we're doing lots of vistas of the ocean and then a school of flying fish and then fucking dolphins going all over the place, it's going to be boring. It's going to feel like Murder on the Orient Express, just without any murders, or the Orient Express. So 30 minutes. The combat, there's only 3 of them. So rule of thumb, that's 30 seconds per person per action. So that means it's 1.5 minutes per round, maybe a little bit less. We can make that last for, say, 10 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, so 15 minutes. Okay. The shark attack, I think we can make that also easily 15 minutes. This is assuming that they don't die. So now if I put my numbers together, so far I've got 1.5 hours on all of that other stuff, which leaves me quite nicely with 2.5 hours for the island journey and the Raven. The Raven could be 30 minutes. So that now puts me on 2 hours. So then I've got 2 hours for the island journey. I'm going to make that 1 hour. And for the sword, I'm going to make that 1 hour. So if you look at my timing, I've written it out here. I'll try and follow that. But again, as I said in the video, it's a guide. So I might play around with that. I might bring the Raven back in again a little bit later, because why would he not follow them? It's an interesting question to ask. Anyway, so now that you've seen my planning and the idea that's in behind it, tonight I will, now in only a few hours, I will quickly draw up a map of the island so I can share that with the players. I will try and drop the map of the ship itself, although we don't have a lot of time on the ship, so it might not necessarily be that important. I'll see if I've got a map that I've made already. The island now, in terms of making it an interesting journey, we've got 1 hour to play on that island journey. And it's horror, so we'll try and come up with graveyards of sailors, shipwrecks that are on the island, that sort of thing. So now the next process would be to flesh out that journey. And that, I think, will happen when I draw the map of the island. It will just sort of add more information. Now, I will try to record that map drawing session, which is next, so that you can have a look at that to see the processes that go into the idea of fleshing out an hour's island journey and an interesting space for that gorge to happen. And then, of course, I will try and record the Skype session so that then you can look at that session and compare and see whether I managed to hit my marks, what my timing was like, and also how that timing works. Because I know a lot of you were worried that, oh, well, if you've got to take 15 minutes and it's 15 minutes, you just kill everything off. That's too literal an interpretation. But it will be interesting to see if you can pick up how I manipulate the time and also how I manipulate the PCs to fall in love with Minefari, to make sure that she is this weird spaced creature that they might love, they might hate, they're not sure. So yes, I look forward to your comments on this video. I hope it has been useful. This video has not been split between you and the Patreons. This is what everybody's getting, this mega video. I might split it into 2 parts, but I think I'd get flack for that. So this hour-long video is all yours. If you like it, well, you know what to do. Hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, leave your comments below. Maybe I didn't have enough of a creative interpretation of the situation. Let me know what you would have come up with for a similar kind of scenario. And of course, I wish you and yours the happiest of gaming.